Gari sa gari ga 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 ma ma gari sa gari re gari ni da gari re ga ga sa gari ga 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 ma ga pa ga da ga ni da ma ga ma ni da ga ma pa da ni ga ma pa da ni ga ma pa da ni sa ri ga ma ga ri sa ni ga ri ni da ma ga ri ga ma da ni ga ri sa ni da ni sa ga ri ni da ni sa ga ma ni da ma ga ri Sari ga Javatana. Welcome to the next episode of Curious Kinships. So as must be obvious by now, the raga that I'm going to talk about today is Thodi. So today's episode is going to be more heavily focused on Carnatic music, but I will talk about one Ilaiyaraja song towards the end. So, as is quite well known among Carnatic folks, there's a lot of gamakam in Thodi, right? And particularly a lot of variety in the gamakam, in the Gandhara. And this swara that I just sang, which is of course from the beautiful song Gajavadana, composed by Kumara Yetendra Bhupati. This is often cited as, the go-to to understand the richness and the variety of the gamakam. The ga can be sung in so many different ways in Thodi, right? So, primarily due to this, the ga, and of course the nishadam and other swaras have gamakam as well, but the ga is, really special in Thodi, I think. So, primarily due to the fact that it's so heavily gamaka laden, the Thodi scale is very different from the Thodi ragam, right? By scale, I mean if you just strip it down to the bare bones, the skeletal swara structure of Thodi, if you just sing the aronam, avaronam plain, it's going to sound not at all like Thodi, right? Not the Thodi that we hear in the Carnatic tradition. So, and because of this, I find it quite amusing that some songs and film songs are classified as Thodi. I saw online somewhere that Usure Pogude from Ravanan is Thodi, and I was like, that doesn't make sense, right? Maybe if you just go by notes, but of course it's vastly different from the Thodi ragam. It doesn't have any of the characteristic gamakas. Anyway, so today I want to focus on one particular gamakam, well maybe two, but mostly one in the Gandharam, that I recently found something very fascinating about. I hadn't realized this all this while. I mean, I've been hearing Thodi since I was a kid. It's a very prominent raga in Carnatic, right? It's such a respected raga. Musicians love Thodi, and it's so commonly sung. It's very common in the Carnatic repertoire, but somehow I hadn't picked this up. Intuitively, like as a kid, Thodi was not a favorite raga. And at the risk of earning the wrath of hardcore Carnatic folks, I'm going to say that even now it's not one of my most favorite ragas. I revere it, I fear it, and I have nothing but immense respect for it, but it doesn't pump me up, when I hear it. And I think the reason for that is probably this revelation that I had recently about, something about the gamakas. So, one particular gamaka of the ga, that one, it was only like a few years ago that, as I was singing this, I was wondering if that gives Thodi a kind of a vivadi-ness, a vivadi flavor, or vivaditvam, if I can call it that. Because that ga reminded me of the ga in Varali, right? Of course, the two gamakas don't perfectly overlap. They don't exactly match up. The oscillations don't exactly match up, but I think there is a very striking similarity, right, in that particular gamaka of the ga. Of course, there are tons of other gamakas, other ways in which you can sing the ga, which are extremely different, but this particular gamaka of the ga. So that made me wonder if maybe Thodi should be given an honorary Vivadi status or limited Vivadi status. Maybe it's quasi Vivadi or something, right? Now, what is Vivadi? So there's lots of websites and lots of videos that do a great job of explaining what Vivadi means. So here I'm not going to get into the details too much. I'll just give a very quick and dirty explanation of what Vivadi means in the Carnatic system. I mean, I'm not going to get into the dissonance aspect and all that. Vivadi essentially means dissonant notes. So I'm not going to get into the theory behind consonance and dissonance and all that. But here's a quick and dirty way of understanding what Vivadi means in Carnatic. So there are 12 Swarasthanas in Carnatic, right? And also in Hindustani. But there's the one difference in Carnatic is that although there are 12 note positions, there are 16 swaras, right? So as you can see in this graphic, there are 3 varieties of the Rishabham, 3 of the Gandharam, 3 of the Devatam and 3 of the Nishadam. And the Ma, the Madhyamam, there are only 2. And the Ma doesn't enter the picture when we're talking about Vivadi. So in the Ri and the Ga, 2 each of the Ri and the Ga overlap with each other. And exactly symmetrically, 2 each of the Devatam and Nishadam overlap with each other. So there are 4 notes that we refer to as Vivadi swaras. As I said, I'm just going to give a very quick practical approach, practical understanding of what Vivadi means. So we can think of these 4 notes as having a default name and a special name. Whenever they assume the special name, the special name, I guess, there are only some handful of ragas where they do that. They assume a Vivadi identity, but otherwise when they have in the default position, they are not treated as Vivadi. So for instance, the Shuddha Gandharam, the default position would be, we would call it a Ri. It would be the Ri 2 or the Chaturshruti Rishabham, but in some ragas we call it the Ga 1. And when it is known by the name Ga 1 or Shuddha Gandharam, we call it Vivadi. So same way Ri 3 and then Da 3 and Ni 1. So what is essentially happening here in Thodi, in this particular gamakam that I pointed out, if we were to notate it, it would be Ga Ri, right? Ga Ri Sa Ni Re Ni Re Ga Ga Ri Re. So that Ga is not the Ga that belongs to the scale of Thodi. It very much belongs to the Ragam Thodi, but it's not the Ga that belongs to the scale Thodi, because in the scale we have the Ga 2, right? Sari Ga. But what we are singing here is right? Ka va va. So that kind of a Ga. But of course, as I said, the oscillations are not exactly the same, but I think the similarity is quite striking. Let me just play a small snippet of the legendary, Sri K.V. Narayan Swami singing this gamakam. He opens the alapana with this particular, gamakam, which is of course very characteristic of Thodi. Right? So now if you think about which raga in the 72 Melakata scheme has this Ga, but with all the other notes the same as Thodi, it turns out to be Ratnangi. So Ratnangi is sa sa re ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa, right? It's the second Melakata in the list of 72 Melakatas. So there's this interesting connection between Thodi and Ratnangi, right? Because of course the Uttarangam, the second half of the scale, is exactly the same as Thodi. In fact, there is an interesting lectem on Ratnangi by Srimati R. Vedavalli on YouTube, and I'll link that as well in the description. So she in fact points out that the second half of the ragam, the Padanisa part, is quite similar to Thodi. Now, Vivadi Ragas don't usually have a lot of gamakam. They are relatively sung very plainly, and Ratnangi is no exception. And also Ratnangi is one of those ragas that that we may call synthetic ragas. They are not pre-existing traditional ragas, but they were sort of created just to fit this scheme of 72 melakattas, right? But the identity that it has today, Ratnangi, I mean, I haven't heard it a lot. I'm just going by Vedavalli Mami's rendition. It's quite similar to Thodi in the second half. The ni gamakam, the way the Padanisa part is sung is quite similar to Thodi. But what is interesting to me is that I think that the similarity is not just in the Uttarangam, it's also in the Purvangam, the Sarigama part. But of course, Thodi is Thodi. It's got its own identity and it's extremely, very, very different from Ratnangi. And as I just said, Ratnangi is much more plain. So we never sing Thodi in that way, right? So although the note technically is that ga one in that gamakam, we sing it with a lot of the way we sing it is very different from the way we sing it in Ratnangi, right? So yeah, let me just put it out there. There are very, very significant differences. So now there's something kind of similar that happens in the da ni region as well. Right? Exactly same kind of thing going on there. So once again, let me play a snippet from that same alapana by Shri KVN. So that part. It's another part. Right, so that exact portion is what I'm talking about. Right, so that again, that would be the ni one, right? Now, if we take this scale, that is, if we take the Vivadi portion in the ga as well as the ni, we get Kanakangi, the very first Melakarta, right? So, Sari ga ma pa da ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. That would be Kanakangi, the very first Melakarta. So, and again, once again, all those disclaimers are still in place. It's Kanakangi sounds very different from Thodi, but if we reduce Thodi to the exact notes of the gamakams, then it seems to have some interesting overlap with Ratnangi and Kanakangi. So, and interestingly, there is a varnam in Thodi that begins with the word Kanakangi. That has nothing to do with anything that I'm saying now, but it's just an interesting coincidence. So anyway, that was the main point of this video. So Thodi seems to be some kind of a combination of, just purely going by the note positions. It seems to be some kind of combination of the Kanakangi scale, Ratnangi scale, of course the Thodi scale itself, and the Senavati scale, right? So it's some kind of, all this put together in a very beautiful way with all the, gamakas, the rich gamakas, I think, probably give Thodi. That's maybe one way to look at Thodi if we want to strip it down to the notes. Okay, so now as promised, I want to get to the Ilaiyaraja song. There is this song called Gangai Kare Mannanadi. Gangai Kare Mannanadi, nanna 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 nanna. So in that song, I noticed something very interesting in the interlude, in the first interlude, and it's like blink and miss, right? It's just very quick. Um there is a Vivadi Prayogam. So this is the starting of the song. Then gari gari zari za zani dhani gari gari zari za. Of course, this is all not Thodi. I would never classify this interlude. The main song is quite okay. I mean I think like much of it can qualify as Thodi, but this interlude is not Thodi. But there's just something interesting that I noticed. The interlude is mostly like just the scalar version of Thodi. It's closer to Sindhu Bhairavi, but I just want to point out something interesting. So that is a Vivadi thing there, right? And as I said, it's like blink and gone. So check that out. I'll link this song as well in the description. Let me just rewind it and play it one more time. Na 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 na, right? Pamagari. So that sounds quite Vivadi, right? So I don't know what Ilaiyaraja was thinking, whether it was very deliberate and intentional that he wanted to insert that Vivadi thing there, or I don't know what it was. So anyway, it's a frequent topic of discussion how Thodi is so much more than the sum of its parts, right? It's so much more than just the plain notes, and how gamakams are so integral to it. But to my knowledge, this Vivadi connection, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. So I thought it might be interesting to bring it up and share it with you all. But of course, let me reiterate before I wrap up that Thodi is Thodi. So it has an unmistakable identity. But if you reduce it to its just bare notes, if you really dissect all the gamakas and reduce it to the bare notes, then I think there are some interesting things to be said about its connection with Vivadi Ragas. So that's it for now. I will see you with the next and probably the last episode of Curious Kinships for now in a few weeks. Hope you enjoyed it and let me know what you thought. Thank you and see you next time.